Hey guys, this is John Scarborough. I want to do a little talking today about starting new businesses and starting new avenues of business. So I think a good example would be if you were, let's say you started in cows, you got going good in cows, you were doing good, and then you got good enough that you decided to start an LLC, and you got a bank account just for that LLC. And now every time you make a transaction, you do it all through that business account. Okay. Now it doesn't have to be a business account. It could be as simple as like when I first started in welding, I didn't have a business account. I didn't do anything like that. It was all cash. I probably shouldn't have, but I didn't know a lot about it, and it's how I got started. And it helped me be better with money using cash. So everything that I made for the business that was supposed to be part of my business account, I did in cash. And then anything that was money from other sources, I wouldn't put inside of that. Let's just call it a bucket. So you got this bucket you put all this money into that comes from your business, from whatever source of income that you've got right now. That could be a bank account, that could be anything. So let's say that now that you've established good in these cows, let's just use the cows for an example. You've established yourself good. I know my finger's in the camera, guys, but it's just going to have to be how it is. You can still see my face. So anyway, so you've gotten good in these cows, but now let's say you want to get into sheep, or you want to get into goats, or you want to get into chickens or rabbits or something else in farming. Okay, let's think for a minute. What would you do? How do you make sure that you're still doing good? How do you make sure that you're doing good in this other business? Because if you start dumping all of this money, let's say that you've been drawing money every time you buy. Let's say you bought something for your cows. Let's say you needed a new float for your float valve or something like that, and you went and bought that valve, or you needed hay, or you needed fuel for your four-wheeler, or you needed a new four-wheeler. All that money would come from that account. The same as anytime you sold a cow, that money would go back into the account. Well, so the same thing would happen when you started your sheep business. All right, you would start to pull all this money out of the cattle account or of your business account. You'd pull all this money away, but at the beginning you wouldn't be making any money on your sheep. Okay, well, that's fine. That's you could call that your own personal business loan. Okay, well, what do you do? How do you make sure that as time goes on that you're making enough money to justify these sheep? Well, of course, obviously you need to be keeping good records and things like that. But things can kind of start getting a little hazy, a little bit mixed up sometimes, and sometimes you just get busy and you don't realize how bad it's getting until it's been quite a while. And so how do you kind of keep up with it? Keep yourself aware of all of this. The best thing that I do, the easiest way I do it, let's say like for us, we started our farm account, okay, and we started doing cows. All right, we started off. At that point, the cows was not our primary source of income. So we had a primary source of income over here, and then we had a cattle account, okay, or you could call it a cattle bucket, whatever you want to. You have a place for the cattle, and everything for the cattle came in and out through there. All right, so then as time went on, we understood that the cows were doing good, so then that became a part of the business account. Eventually, that was the primary source of our money, was the whole business in itself, the microgreens, the bread that we do, the everything we do for the farmers market, and the cows. All of that is our primary source of income at this point. So all of that goes into and comes back out of the account, the business account. All right. So let's say we wanted to start sheep now. Well, I'm not going to start putting all of my money for my sheep back into this account. I'm not going to start drawing in and out from this account. Okay, so what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to open up a separate account. All right, now I'm going to have to start off with an initial loan from my business account. Okay, from the business account, I'm going to have to get that initial loan to buy said amount of sheep. Let's just use an example. Let's say we bought 10 sheep. All right, now let's say, and this is what I'm calling my startup cost. So I don't count my startup cost. I don't worry too much about that. I mean, you've got to count it, but I'm saying I'm not worried about it in this specific example. So let's say we get our 10 sheep, and now we need a couple extra water troughs and water floats. We need a little bit of extra fencing. We need different things to get us going, get us off the ground with our sheep. All right, so we go ahead and we pull the investment from our business account. And we do this only when we know that we can afford the investment. All right, let's say we need the write-off, or let's say that we know that we've got a little extra money over here and we need the investment and we can afford the investment. At that point, that's when we make that investment into the sheep. So now after I've made that startup cost, all right, you may have little bits of startup costs here and there from the time that you get to sheep until you start selling more sheep. Let's say you're going to start selling lambs. Let's say in this case you're not even selling butchered lambs at this moment. Like, you're not selling meat, you're just selling whole lambs, live, just livestock. Okay. Well, it's going to take you a little while before you start making money. So there's going to be little bits of input, little loans here and there that you're going to have to get. That's all part of that startup cost. So I'm not going to worry about it too much. I want to kind of keep my eyes on it. I'm going to write it down what it is, what the startup cost is, so that I got an idea just how much I've spent. What is my total investment of my startup cost? Once I get past that point and I start to make sheep money, all right, I'm going to take this sheep money and I'm going to start putting it into its own bucket. I've got my main account, and that consists of cows and microgreens and just anything for the farm. All these different things for the farm that we do, that's what that account consists of. That account is full of things that have proven themselves. The sheep have not proven themselves to be a worthy investment yet. On paper, it makes sense, but if you just depend on paper, if you just do the math, or you watch videos and other people say, oh, you can make this much money, if you just depend on that, you may go broke. All right, that doesn't mean you will. That just means that it could become a problem. Be wary of that. In other words, when you first get started, you need to have this separate bucket for the sheep or whatever it is that you're getting into. And then now everything that you buy for sheep, okay, once you sell those first sheep, you deposit that money back into there. Now everything that you buy for those sheep needs to come from that account. Just the same as every time you sell sheep, it goes into that account and not into your business account. That way, your little business venture over here is separate from your main business, all right? You understand that it's the same business, but it's separate so that it's easy to keep an eye on. It's easy to understand, okay, I'm supposed to be making money over here with the sheep, but I always have to dip back into here. I'm always having to get a loan from my main business. And that's fine at first. It is fine, but it's something you need to keep an eye on. But if over time you continue to do that, and you continue to do that, and you realize that it can just help you to realize sooner that, okay, the sheep are not making money. They're just not going to do it. Or the dogs, or the rabbits, or the chickens, or whatever it is, we're using sheep. Okay, this business venture over here is not paying for itself. So then it just kind of keeps you on your toes, all right? So then you're able to say, all right, let me tweak some things, or I need to get rid of it completely and do something else, all right? So it's just kind of a little mechanism, using these little buckets over time. Now let's go into the example. Let's say that you've tweaked a few things, you've gotten some things, and now it's working, all right? You've actually got it to the point where you can actually start making money off of this thing, and it's completely turning itself over, and now this account is growing. It's growing. Once you get to that point and you realize that it is growing, it is taking care of itself, it is doing well for itself, you can do one of two things, all right? You can either take a new loan from your business account and expand this business, okay? if you think that this venture is doing good, you can expand it to make it grow faster, or you can go ahead and just combine it into there and let it grow slowly. Either way, if you take a new loan from here to expand this little bit business venture, I would continue to keep this one separate to make sure that as it grows, that new loan, that new thing that you've done, that it goes ahead, you know for a fact that it's still doing good. All right. Once you get to the point where you know it's good, you're no longer getting any more loans over here, you're no longer having to do anything from the business, you know that the sheep are running the sheep. The sheep are paying for themselves and they're making you more money. At that point, then you move all that over and you don't have to be quite as stressed out. It's a little bit more keeping you on your toes. It's a little bit of a hassle, you know, because you're having to separate the money here. You're having to do separate things. For a while there, me and my wife had what we called the business account and what we called the cattle account. And it was a little bit of a hassle. It wasn't too bad, but it was a little bit. Having to keep all that separate, having to make sure we put the money into the right account and things. But when you start a new business or a new business venture, you need to be keeping an eye on that one closer. It needs to be just a little bit of a hassle, because that little bit of a hassle, it's like when you have $100 bills in your wallet instead of a card in your wallet. When you got $100 bills in your wallet, and I'm not telling anybody how to run their business, I'm just saying, you got $100 bills in your wallet and you start spending money, every time you break that $100 bill, you know, every time you break a new one, it's a little tick up here, a little thing that happens up in your head. Every time you spend that card, you don't realize how many hundreds you've spent. You have no clue, okay? You don't even realize it. And yes, you can keep up with it online. You can write it down in a book, but nothing keeps you on your toes like seeing those $100 bills getting broke, okay? Every time. So it's kind of that same principle, and you need to use that principle, or at least that's how I like it. You can do what you want. That's just my advice on it. That's how we do it. And I've been able to weed out certain business ventures. Like, all right, I know this one's not going to work. I'm not going to make enough money on this one. Or, okay, I've been able to break even, been able to keep the business alive, but I've never grown, never been able to grow. One example of that is I started my little leather venture years and years ago. And I always knew I wanted it to be a hobby, but I started it with the same principle, with keeping that money separate. Now, I started out with just being in an envelope. Sorry guys, I got cut off from that last video I was just talking about in the car. I'm back at the house now. I just figured I'd pick up where I started off, where I left off. Basically, I was talking about where one example of what I was speaking about was the leather business that I had gone into. And what I did was I started this leather business, and I did it all in cash. And what that actually allowed me to do was to monitor it and to keep an eye on it. And so the way that one turned out was actually I made enough money to keep the business going. I never had to dip back in. The first time I spent an initial amount of money to buy some stuff, I was perfectly fine. And I was able to keep growing and keep on going. And what I found over time was I was able to actually invest in new things in the business. And I kind of knew that it wasn't really meant to be a business. I knew that it was more my hobby. And so it was okay the way that it was going. And even to this day, I'm completely content with it going that way. I knew that as a hobby, I at least wanted it to completely pay for itself. But anyway, so I was able to do that, and found out that I was not able to very, very easily make enough money. Now, I actually could have made a living, but I found that the time ratio wasn't working out. So the main thing is it helped me to keep an eye on that, because I could look at my time, how much time it actually took me to make a Bible case, or to make a wallet, or a gun holster, or something like that. I had made different kinds of things, and like I said, I enjoyed it, I loved it, and I still do it, just for myself and for friends and family and things like that. But I understand now, I was able to understand because of that principle, that it wasn't going to be a successful business. It wasn't going to be something that I needed to spend my time doing to continue on that way, because basically I just made just enough that I could continue to invest in the business very, very slowly, but I was never going to make enough to really pay for the amount of time that I was putting into it. If you calculated my time, I'd probably making just a couple bucks an hour. So really it wasn't worth doing. But if I had just taken that money, let's just say I took that money and I put it into, I got like a web here on my nose. There's a couple spider webs I just walked into when I walked here in the shop. But let's say that I took that money instantly and I started putting it into the business account. Well, then every time I bought stuff, I bought it back from there. And then let's say that I didn't really ever look at my time either, like how much time I was putting into it. It's very possible that I wouldn't really realize for quite some time. I wouldn't have any data to look at to tell myself, okay, and maybe even if I did write down the data and I could go back in my books and look at it, let's say I was really good at keeping data, I still wouldn't have that little tick like I was talking about. I wouldn't have that thing going off in my brain, thing that says, okay, this is only got so much money coming in. It's just not really paying for itself. It's definitely not going to pay the bills, and it's not worth continuing to do. And I think the easiest example that I could put out there to kind of sum up everything that I've said is basically you could say that let's just say you started making money on a couple different things. Let's say you're making money on cows, and we're going to use a very small number here. Let's say you're making $500 on cows. And it's just whatever, a not random number, $500 a week on cows, $250 a week on sheep, $400 on, let's say, rabbits, and then you're making all that much money, and then you separate them into each different little bucket, okay? And you find out that for that $500 a week over here, you're only putting out about $35 a week to keep that going. Plus your hours, the amount of hours it's taking you. Your time is worth something, okay? But let's say that the amount of hours and you're putting in it, and you're only putting $35 a week, but you're making $500. Well, that business is paying for itself, okay? Well, let's say $250 goes by, all right? $250, and for the sheep, all right? A week goes by and you find out that every week you're spending, let's say, $249. Or let's say, worst case, you're actually spending $275 or $300 a week. You're actually spending more money. Well, and actually worst case would be this. You make $250 a week, but you spend an equivalent, now this is an average, an equivalent of $251 for the sheep. Okay, that's actually worse. And why is it worse? Because if you combined all your businesses together, you wouldn't notice it. You would almost not notice it at all, and it could become a problem. You would actually begin to get to where you really didn't notice what was going on because there's not really a whole lot of change there. And so why is that a bad thing? If you're technically breaking even, well, first off, you're breaking even, but secondly, you're putting all this time. You're putting time into your sheep, but your cattle's having to pay for it. Your cattle's having to do it. Now you're telling yourself, well, my business is suffering. I'm just not doing well in my business. I don't know why. Well, you may find that your business isn't suffering. Your sheep is suffering. Or you may find that your sheep and your rabbits are suffering. And that if you would just move to your cows, or if you would just move to one thing that was actually working, then your business would actually be doing great. You would have plenty time to continue to do what you want to do. You wouldn't feel like you were working all the time or spinning your wheels. But you're spinning your wheels because you're carrying all this extra load on your back and you don't realize it. But so essentially by separating these things, when you first start off, you're able to really get an idea how the business is going to do for itself. Okay? So I hope that helps somebody. I kind of wanted to put that out there. I know it has helped me so much. I've never started a business venture, and I've never been in debt on a business venture, and I've never not, oh, that's not true. I have gotten out some loans on some stuff. But what I mean is I've always made enough money. I've never made less money than I've than I've spent. So, but there are a few businesses that I found I wasn't making enough on. A couple little business ventures on the side, investments on the side, little things. I found out that I was not making enough on the side. And so it's just easy for me. It's an easier way for me without managing all this extra stuff to just a very clear-cut line that says, this works, this doesn't, okay? Simple as that. So cut and dry. I hope that helps somebody. I really do. If y'all do like these videos, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks.